Hey, crazy mama, how are you? Sunshine, welcome, welcome. Thank you, Wings. I don't know if you guys can see it, but I am wearing my birthday button. How are we all doing this evening? We survived Monday. I think you guys are going to like the stories tonight. Hey, Mary, how are you? Hey, Katie. Crazy mama, that's awful. Fuck, cancer, dude. Hey, Lynn, how are you? Welcome in. Raven Eye Films, welcome in. Yeah, I've got two good stories tonight. Oh boy. Well, all the best to her. I hope it all works out. Brandy, I totally understand. I actually don't have visuals for these stories tonight, Wings, so there will be no button clicking. Mary, I one of them is, at least is a bit scary. Gam, how are you? Happy Monday. I have one that was published in 1941 in Unknown Worlds magazine. It's called Hereafter Inc. The author's name is Lester Del Rey. He's one of the early pulp authors that was published in a lot of pulp magazines like Weird Tales and whatnot. And then the second story is The Mangler by Stephen King. Somebody requested that, and I went through it last night, and I was like, yes, I can read this. Tiny Toon Tots. Actually, it is supposed to be sort of a cartoon version of me. Eddie, welcome in, brother. How are you? I'm so glad you enjoyed it, Chris. It's a wonderful story. It's one of my favorites, and yeah. And you guys got to see me cry, so you know. Oh, Tina, you're welcome. This is going to be a fun week. KC, that's awesome. Well, I hope Pin-Up Pajama Party, welcome. I'm glad you found us. And stick around for some stories. So it's almost time to start. We got 2 stories tonight. I did pick out another story, which will be a whole night. One of the nights this week, I'm doing my very first Clive Barker story. So we've got multiple birthdays this week from the community, so I'm looking forward to that. All right. So I think I'm going to get started. And, yeah. All right. Good evening, everyone. Yes, Bluetooth into the big speaker. Gotta love that. Absolutely, Wings. Absolutely. Oh. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of Storytime with UndeadPapa. As you all know, my birthday is this week. In fact, it is tomorrow. I'll be turning 51. I don't know how that happened, because, calendar says I'm 51. My brain says I'm 25, but my body wants to know when we died and woke up in hell. I've got two stories tonight, one from 1941, the pulp era of horror, and I've got the My Kind of Crazy, You Are Absolutely on Time. And the other is a Stephen King story that was requested by somebody in chat. I can't remember who because, my brain doesn't remember things. And that is The Mangler by Stephen King. So, thank you all for coming in. I think it's going to be a great night. Sit back and relax. Wherever you're listening from, sit back, relax. I will be reading short stories, and I will be reading the whole things. I've got 2 stories tonight. You are very welcome. So, wherever you're listening from, sit back and relax, because story time is about to begin. This is Hereafter Inc. by Lester Del Rey. Phineas Theophilus Potts, who would have been the last to admit and the first to believe he was a godly man, creaked over in bed and stuck out one scrawny arm wrathfully. The raucous jangling of the alarm was an unusually painful cancer in his soul that morning. Then his waking mind took over, and he checked his hand, bringing it down on the alarm button with precise but gentle firmness. Would he never learn to control these little angers? In this world one should bear all troubles with uncomplaining meekness, not rebel against them. Otherwise, but it was too early in the morning to think of that. He wriggled out of bed and gave his thoughts over to the ritual of remembering yesterday's sins, checking to make sure all had been covered and wiped out the night before. That's when he got his first shock. He couldn't remember anything about the day before. Bad. Very bad. Well, no doubt it was another trap of the forces conspiring to secure Potts' soul. Terrible, but he could circumvent even that snare. There was no mere mumbling by habit to his confusion. Word after word rolled off his tongue carefully with full knowledge and unctuous shame until he reached the concluding lines. For the manifold sins which I have committed, and for this greater sin which now afflicts me, forgive and guide me to sin no more, but preserve me in righteousness all the days of my life. Amen. Thus, having avoided the pitfall and saved himself again from eternal combustion, he scrubbed hands with himself and began climbing into his scratchy underclothes and cheap black suit. Then he indulged in a breakfast of dry toast and buttermilk flavored with self-denial, and was ready to fare forth into the world of temptation around him. The telephone jangled against his nerves, and he jumped. Grabbing for it impatiently before he remembered, he addressed the mouthpiece contritely. "Phineas Potts speaking." It was Mr. Sloane, his lusty animal voice barking out from the receiver. "Hello, Finn. They told me you're ready to come down to work today. Business is booming, and we could use you. How about it?" "Certainly, Mr. Sloane. I'm not one to shirk my duty." There was no reason for the call that Potts could see. He hadn't missed a day in 12 years. "You know—" "Sure, okay, that's fine. Just wanted to warn you that we've moved. You'll see the nameplate across the street when you come out. Swell place, too. Sure you can make it all right?" "I shall be there in 10 minutes, Mr. Sloane," Phineas assured him, and remembered in time to hang up without displaying distaste. Poor Sloane, wallowing in sin and ignorant of the doom that awaited him. Why, the last time Phineas had chided his employer, mildly, too, Sloane had actually laughed at him. Dear. Well, no doubt he incurred grace by trying to save the poor lost soul, even though his efforts seemed futile. Of course, there was danger in consorting with such people, but no doubt his sacrifices would be duly recorded. There was a new elevator boy, apparently. When he came out of his room, he sniffed pointedly at the smoke from the boy's cigarette. The boy twitched his lips, but did not throw it away. "Okay, bub," he grunted as the doors clanked shut, grating across Phineas's nerves. "I don't like it no better than you will, but here we are." Bub. Phineas glared at the shoulders turned to him and shuddered. He'd see Miss Biddle about this later. Suppressing his feelings with some effort, he headed across the lobby, scarcely noting it, and stepped out onto the street. Then he stopped. That was the second jolt. He swallowed twice, opened his eyes, and lifted them for the first time in weeks, and looked again. It hadn't changed. Where there should have been a little twisted side street near the tenements, he saw instead a broad, gleaming thoroughfare, busy with people and bright in warm golden sunshine. Opposite, the ugly stores were replaced with bright new office buildings, and the elevated tracks were completely missing. He swung slowly about, clutching his umbrella for support as he faced the hotel. It was still a hotel, but not his. Definitely not his. Nor was the lobby the same. He fumbled back into it, shaken and bewildered. The girl at the desk smiled up at him, out of dancing eyes, and she certainly wasn't the manager. Nor would prim Mrs. Biddle, who went to his church, have hired this brazen little thing. Both her lips and fingernails were bright crimson to begin with, and beyond that he preferred not to go. The brazen little thing smiled again, as if glorying in her obvious idolatry. "Forget something, Mr. Potts?" No. That is, you know who I am." She nodded brightly. "Yes, indeed, Mr. Potts. You moved in yesterday, room 408. Is everything satisfactory?" Phineas half nodded, gulped, and stumbled out again. Moved in? He couldn't recall it. Why should he leave Mrs. Biddle's? And 408 was his old room number. The room was identical with the one he had lived in, even to the gray streak on the wallpaper that had bothered his eyes for years. Something was horribly wrong. First, the lack of memory, then Sloane's peculiar call. Now this. He was too upset even to realize that this was probably another temptation set before him. Mechanically, Phineas spied Sloane's nameplate on one of the new buildings and crossed over into it. "Morning, Mr. Potts," said the elevator boy, and Phineas jumped. He'd never seen this person before either. "Fourth floor, Mr. Potts. Mr. Sloane's office is just 2 doors down." Phineas followed the directions and automatically found the door marked G.R. Sloane, Architect, and pushed into a huge room filled with the almost unbearable clatter of typewriters and comptometers, the buzz of voices, and the jarring thump of a dressing machine. But this morning the familiarity of the sound seemed like a haven out of the wilderness until he looked around. Not only had Sloane moved, but he'd apparently also expanded and changed most of his office force. Only old Callahan was left, and Callahan... Strange. He felt sure Callahan had retired or something the year before. Oh well, that was the least of his puzzles. Callahan seemed to sense his stare, for he jumped up and brought a ham-like fist down on Phineas's back, almost knocking out the ill-fitting false teeth. "Finn Potts, you old doom-monger, welcome back." He thumped again, and Potts coughed, trying to reach the spot and rub out the sting. Not only did Callahan have to be an atheist, an argumentative one, but he had to indulge in this gross horseplay. Why hadn't the man stayed properly retired? "Mr. Sloane," he managed to gurgle. Sloane himself answered, his rugged face split in a grin. "Hi, Finn. Let him alone, Callahan. Another thump like that and I'll have to hire a new draftsman. Come on, Finn. There's the devil's own amount of work piled up for you now that you're back from your little illness." He led him around a bunch of tables where bright-painted hussies were busily typing, down a hall and into the drafting room, exchanging words with others that made Phineas wince. Really, his language seemed to grow worse each day. "Mr. Sloane, would you please—" "Mind not using such language?" Sloane finished and grinned. "Finn, I can't help it. I feel too good. Business is terrific, and I've got the world by the tail. How do you feel?" Very well, thank you." Phineas fumbled and caught the thread of former conversation that had been bothering him. "You said something about illness." "Think nothing of it. After working for me 12 years, I'm not going to dock your pay for a mere month's absence. Kind of a shame you had to be off just when I needed you, but things will happen, so we'll just forget it, eh?" He brushed aside the other's muttered attempt at questioning and dug into the plans. "Here, better start on this. You'll notice some changes. But it's a lot like what we used to do, something like the Oswego we built in 37. Only thing that'll give you trouble is the new steel they put out now. But you can follow specifications on that." Phineas picked up the specifications, ran them over, and blinked. This would never do. Much as he loathed the work, he was an excellent draftsman, and he knew enough of general structural design to know this would never do. But 2-inch I-beams here... "'S all right, Finn. Structural strength is about 12 times what you're used to. Makes some really nice designing possible, too. Just follow the things like I said, and I'll go over it all later. Things changed a little while you were delirious, but I'm in a devil of a rush right now. See you." He stuck his body through the door, thrust his head back inside, and cocked an eyebrow. "Lunch? Need somebody to show you around, I guess." "As you wish, Mr. Sloane," agreed Phineas. "But would you please mind—" "Not swearing. Sure, okay. No religious arguments this time. If I'm damned, I like it." Then he was gone, leaving Phineas alone. He couldn't work with the distraction of others, and always had a room to himself. The name of this story, if you are wondering, is called Hereafter Inc., and was written by Lester Del Rey and first published in 1941. So he'd been sick, had he? Even delirious? Well, that might explain things. Phineas had heard that such things sometimes produced a hiatus in the memory, and it was a better explanation than nothing. With some relief, he put it out of his mind, remembering only to confess how sinfully he'd lost his trust in divine guidance this morning, shook his head mournfully, and began to work with dutiful resignation. Since it had obviously been ordained that he should make his simple living at drafting, draft he would, with no complaints, and there would be no fault to be found with him there. The pen began to scratch. He cleaned and adjusted it, finding nothing wrong, but still it made little grating sounds on the paper, lifting up the raw edges of his nerves. Had Phineas believed in evolution, he'd have said the hair his ancestors had once grown was trying to stand on end, but he had no use for such heretical ideas. Well, he was not one to complain. He unclenched his teeth and sought forbearance and peace within. Then, outside, the addressograph began to thump again, and he had to force himself not to ruin the lines as his body tried to flinch. Be patient. All these trials would be rewarded. Finally, he turned to the only anodyne he knew, contemplation of the fate of heretics and sinners. Of course, he was sorry for them roasting eternally and crying for water which they would never get. Very sorry for the poor deluded creatures, as any righteous man should be. Yet still, they had been given their chance, and not made proper use of it. So it was only just, picturing morbidly the hell of his most dour Puritan ancestors. Something very real to him. He almost failed to notice the ache of his bunion where the cheap shoes pinched. But not quite. Callahan was humming out in the office, and Phineas could just recognize the tune. Once the atheist had come in roaring drunk, and before they'd sent him home, he'd cornered Phineas and sung it through, unexpurgated. Wow, that's a word. Now, in time with the humming, the words insisted on trickling through the suffering little man's mind, and try as he would, they refused to leave. Prayer did no good. Then he added Callahan to the tortured shiners, and that worked better. Pencils, shoestrings, razor blades. The words behind him startled him, and he regained his balance on the stool with difficulty. Standing just inside the door was a one-legged hunchback with a handful of cheap articles. "Pencils?" he repeated. "Only a nickel, help a poor cripple." But the grin on his face belied the words. "Indeed, no pencils." Phineas shuddered as the fellow hobbled over to a window and rid himself of a chew of tobacco. "Why don't you try the charities? Furthermore, we don't allow beggars here." "Ain't none," the fellow answered with ambiguous cheerfulness, stuffing in a new bite. "Then have faith in the Lord, and he will provide." Naturally, man had been destined to toil through the days of his life in his mortal sphere, and toil he must to achieve salvation. He had no intention of ruining this uncouth person's small chance to be saved by keeping him in idleness. The beggar nodded and touched his cap. "One of them, eh? Too bad. Well, keep your chin up. Maybe it'll be better later." Then he went off down the hall, whistling, leaving Phineas to puzzle over his words and give it up as a bad job. Potts rubbed his bunion tenderly, then desisted, realizing that pain was only a test and should be borne meekly. The pen still scratched, the addressing machine thumped, and a bee had buzzed in somehow and went zipping about. It was a large and active bee. Phineas cowered down and made himself work, sweating a little as the bee lighted on his drafting board. Then, mercifully, it flew away, and for a few minutes he couldn't hear it. When it began again, it was behind him. He started to turn his head, then decided against it. The bee might take the motion as an act of aggression and declare war. His hands on the pen were moist and clammy, and his fingers ached from gripping it too tightly. But somehow he forced himself to go on working. The bee was evidently in no hurry to leave. It flashed by his nose, buzzing him, making him jerk back and splatter a blob of ink onto the plans, then went zooming around his head and settled on his bald spot. Phineas held his breath, and the bee stood pat. 10, 20, 30 seconds. His breath went out suddenly with a rush. The insect gave a brief buzz, evidently deciding the noise was harmless, and began strolling down over his forehead and out onto his nose. It tickled. The inside of his nose tickled sympathetically. "No, no," Phineas whispered desperately. "No, chew! Ow!" He grabbed for his nose and jerked violently, bumping his shins against the desk and splashing more ink on the plans. Damn! Oh, damn! It was unbelievable. It couldn't be true. His own mouth had betrayed him. With shocked and leaden fingers he released the pen and bowed his head, but no sense of saving grace would come. Too well he could remember that even the smallest sin deserves just damnation. Now he was really sweating, and the visions of eternal torment came trooping back. But this time he was in Callahan's place, and try as he would switch. He was doomed. Callahan found him in that position a minute later, and his rough, mocking laugh cut into Phineas's wounded soul. "Sure, an angel as I live and breathe." He dumped some papers onto the desk and gave another back-breaking thump. "Got the first sheets done, Finn?" Miserably, Phineas shook his head, glancing at the clock. They should have been ready an hour ago. Another sin was piled upon his burden, beyond all hope of redemption. And of all people, Callahan had caught him not working when he was already behind. But the old Irishman didn't seem to be gloating. "There now, don't take it so hard, Finn. Nobody expects you to work like a horse when you've been sick. Mr. Sloane wants you to come to lunch with him now." Words wouldn't come. Callahan thumped him on his back again, this time lightly enough to rattle only 2 ribs. "Go along with you. What's left is beginner's stuff, and I'll finish it while you're eating. I'm ahead and got nothing to do anyhow. Go on." He practically picked the smaller man off the stool and shoved him through the door. "Sloane's waiting. Heck, I'll be glad to do it. Feels so good I can't find enough to keep me busy." Sloane was flirting with one of the typists as Phineas plodded up, but he wound up that business with a wink and grabbed for his hat. "'S the matter, Finn? You look all in. Bad bruise on your nose, too. Well, a good lunch'll fix up the first part, at least. Best damned food you ever ate, and right around the corner." "Yes, Mr. Sloane, but would you, No, couldn't ask that now. He himself was a sinner given to violent language. Glumly he followed the other out and into the corner restaurant. Then, as he settled into the seat, he realized he couldn't eat. First among his penances should be giving up lunches. "I don't feel very hungry, Mr. Sloane. I'll just have a cup of tea, I think." The odors of the food in the clean little restaurant that brought twinges to his stomach would only make his penance that much greater. But Sloane was ordering for two. "Same as usual, honey, and you might as well bring a second for my friend here." He turned to Phineas. "Trouble with you, Finn, is that you don't eat enough. Wait till you get a whiff of the ham they serve here, and the pie. Starting now, you're eating right if I have to stuff it down you. Ah." Service was prompt, and the plates began to appear before the little man's eyes. He could feel his mouth watering, and had to swallow in protest, when the look in Sloane's eye made him decide not to. Well, at least he could fast morning and night instead. He nodded to himself glumly, wishing his craven appetite wouldn't insist on deriving so much pleasure from the food. "And so," Sloane's voice broke in on his consciousness again, "after this, you're either going to promise me you'll eat 3 good meals a day, or I'll come around and stuff it down you, hear?" "Yes, Mr. Sloane, but—" "Good. I'm taking that as a promise." Phineas cringed. He hadn't meant it that way. It couldn't go through as a promise. "But—" "No buts about it. Down there I figured you had as good a chance of being right as I did, so I didn't open my mouth on the subject. But up here, that's done with. No reason why you can't enjoy life now." That was too much. "Life," said Phineas, laying down his knife and preparing for siege, "was meant to give us a chance to prepare for the life to come, not to lie squandered in wanton pleasure. Surely it's better to suffer through a few brief years resisting temptations than to be forever damned to perdition. And would you sacrifice heaven for mere mundane cravings, transient and worthless?" "Stow it, Finn. Doesn't seem to me I sacrificed much to get here." Then, at Phineas's bewildered look, "Don't tell me you don't realize where you are. They told me they were sending a boy with the message. Well, I guess he just missed you. You're dead, Finn. This is heaven. We don't talk much about it, but that's the way it is." "No!" The world was rolling in circles under Phineas's seat. He stared uncomprehendingly at Sloane, finding not the slightest sign of mockery on the man's face. And there was the hole in the memory of sins and the changes, and Callahan. Why, Callahan had died and been buried the year before, and here he was, looking 10 years younger and hearty as ever. But it was all illusion, of course. It was all illusion. Callahan wouldn't be in heaven. No, it couldn't be. "But it is, Finn. Remember? I was down your way to get you for overtime work, and yelled at you just as you came out of your house. Then you started across. I yelled again, 'Come back now.' There'd been a screeching of tires, Sloane running toward him, suddenly waving frantically, and blackout. Then it hit. And this is—" "Uh-huh. Seems they picked me up with a shovel, but it took a month to finish you off." Sloane dug into the pie, rolling it on his tongue and grinning. "And this is hereafter. A darn good one, too. Even if nobody meets you at the gate to say welcome to heaven." Phineas clutched at the straw. "They didn't tell you this was heaven, then?" Oh, that explained everything. Of course, he should have known. This wasn't heaven after all. It couldn't be. And though it differed from his conceptions, it most certainly could be the other place. There'd been that bee. It was just like Callahan and Sloane to enjoy perdition, misguided sinners glorying in their unholiness. Slowly, the world righted itself, and Phineas Potts regained his normal state. To be sure, he'd used an ugly word, but what could be expected of him in this vile place? They'd never hold it against him under the circumstances. He lowered his eyes thankfully, paying no attention to Sloane's idle remarks about unfortunates. Now, if he could just find the authorities of this place and get the mistake straightened out, all might be well. He had always done his best to be righteous. Perhaps a slight delay, but not long. And then, no Callahan, no Sloane, no drafting or bees or grating noises. He drew himself up and looked across at Sloane, sadly, but justly doomed to this strange Gehenna. Mr. Sloane, he asked firmly, is there some other place where I can find, authorities? You mean you want to register a complaint? Why, sure. A big white building about 6 blocks down. Adjustment and appointment office. Sloane studied him thoroughly. Darned if you don't look like you had a raw deal about something at that. Look, Finn, they made mistakes sometimes, of course, but if they'd handed you the little end, we'd go right down there and get it put right. Phineas shook his head quickly. The proper attitude, no doubt, was to leave Sloane in ignorance of the truth as long as possible, and that meant he'd have to go alone. Thank you, Mr. Sloane, but I'll go by myself, if you don't mind, and, if I don't come back, Sure, take the whole afternoon off. Hey, wait, aren't you going to finish lunch? But Phineas Potts was gone, his creaking legs carrying him out into the mellow noon sunlight and toward the towering white building that must be his destination. The fate of a man's soul is nothing to dally over, and he wasn't dallying. He tucked his umbrella close under his arm to avoid contact with the host of the damned, shuddering at the thought of mingling with them. Still, undoubtedly his torture would be added to the list of others, and his reward be made that much greater. Then he was at the Office of Administration, Appointments, and Adjustments. There was another painted Jezebel at the desk marked Information, and he headed there, barely collecting his thoughts in time to avoid disgraceful excitement. She grinned at him and actually winked. Mr. Potts, isn't it? Oh, I'm sorry you left before our messenger arrived, but if there's something we can do now... There is, he told her firmly, though not too unkindly. After all, her punishment was ample without his anger. I wish to see an authority here. I have a complaint, a most grievous complaint. Oh, that's too bad, Mr. Potts. But if you'll see Mr. Alexander down the hall, 3rd door left, I'm sure he can adjust it. He waited no longer, but hurried where she pointed. As he approached, the 3rd door opened, and a dignified-looking man in a gray business suit stepped to it. The man held out his hand instantly. I'm Mr. Alexander. Come in, won't you? Katie said you had a complaint. Sit right over there, Mr. Potts. So. Now, if you'll tell me about it, I think we can straighten it all out. Phineas told him in detail. And so, he concluded firmly, quite firmly, I feel I've been done a grave injustice, Mr. Alexander. I'm positive my destination should have been the other place. The other place? Alexander seemed surprised. Exactly. Heaven, to be more precise. Alexander nodded thoughtfully. Quite so, Mr. Potts. Only I'm afraid there's been a little misunderstanding. You see, this is heaven. Still, I can see you don't believe me yet, so we've failed to place you properly. We really want to make people happy here, you know. So, if you'll just tell me what you find wrong, we'll do what we can to rectify it. Oh, Phineas considered. This might be a trick, of course, but still, if they could make him happy here, give him his due reward for the years filled with temptation resisted and noble suffering in meekness and humility, there seemed nothing wrong with it. Possibly, it came to him, there were varying degrees of blessedness, and even such creatures as Callahan and his ilk were granted the lower ones, though it didn't seem quite just. But certainly his level wasn't Callahan's. Very well, he decided. First, I find myself in that room with the gray streak on the wallpaper, sir, and for years I've loathed it, and the alarm, and telephone, and... Alexander smiled. One at a time, please. Now, about the room. I really felt we'd done a masterly job on that, you know. It isn't exactly like your room on the former level of life. I see it is. And didn't you choose and furnish that room yourself? Yes, but... then we were right. Naturally, Mr. Potts, we assumed that since it was of your own former creation, it was best suited to you. And besides, you need the alarm and telephone to keep you on time and in contact with your work, you know. But I loathe drafting. Phineas glanced at the demon who was trying to trap him, expecting it to wilt to its true form. It didn't. Instead, the thing that was Mr. Alexander shook its head slowly and sighed. Now, that is a pity. And we were so pleased to find we could give you the same employer as before. Really, we felt you'd be happier under him than a stranger. However, if you don't like it, I suppose we could change. What other kind of work would you like? Now that was more like it, and perhaps he had even misjudged Alexander. Work was something Phineas hadn't expected, but, yes, that would be nice, if it could be arranged here. I felt once I was called, he suggested. Minister, you mean? Now that's fine. Never get too many of them, Mr. Potts. Wonderful men do wonderful work here. They really add enormously to the happiness of our hereafter, you know. Let me see, what experience have you had? He beamed at Potts, who thawed under it. Then he turned to a bookshelf, selected a heavy volume, and consulted it. Slowly the beam vanished. Worry took its place. Ah, yes. Phineas Theophilus Potts. Yes, entered training, 1903. Dismissed after 2 years of study, due to a feeling he might not be quite temperamentally suited to the work, and that he was somewhat too overly zealous in his criticism of others, then transferred to his uncle's shop and took up drafting, which was thereafter his life's work. Really, that's too bad. Alexander turned back to Phineas. Then, Mr. Potts, I take it you never had any actual experience at this sort of work. Phineas squirmed. No, but... Too bad, Alexander sighed. Really, I'd like to make things more to your satisfaction, but after all, no experience. Afraid it wouldn't do. Tell you what, we don't like to be hasty in our judgments. If you'll just picture exactly the life you want, no need to describe it, I'll get it if you merely think it. Maybe we can adjust things. Try hard now. With faint hope, Phineas tried. Alexander's voice droned out at him. A little harder. No, that's only a negative picture of what you'd like not to do. No. I thought for a minute you had something, but it's gone. I think you're trying to picture abstractions, Mr. Potts, and you know one can't do that. I get something very vague, but it makes no sense. There, that's better. He seemed to listen for a few seconds longer, and Phineas was convinced now it was all sham. He'd given up trying. What was the use? Vague, jumbled thoughts were all he had left, and now Alexander's voice broke in on them. Really, Mr. Potts, I'm afraid there's nothing we can do for you. I get a very clear picture now, but it's exactly the life we'd arranged for you, you see. Same room, same work. Apparently that's the only life you know. Of course, if you want to improve, we have a great many very fine schools located throughout the city. Phineas jerked upright, the control over his temper barely on. You mean I've got to go on like that? Afraid so. But you distinctly said this was heaven. It is. And I tell you, Phineas cried, forgetting all about controlling his temper, that this is hell. Quite so. I never denied it. Now, Mr. Potts, I'd like to discuss this further, but others are waiting, so I'm afraid I'll have to ask you to leave. Alexander looked up from his papers as he looked, Phineas found himself outside the door, shaken and sick. The door remained open as the girl called Katy came up, looked at him in surprise, and went in. Then it closed. But still he stood there, unable to move, leaning against the wooden frame for support. There was a mutter of voices within, and his whirling thoughts seized on them for anchor. Katy's voice first. Seems to take it terribly hard, Mr. Alexander. Isn't there something we can do? Then the low voice of Alexander. Nothing, Katy. It's up to him now. I suggested the schools, but I'm afraid he's another unfortunate. Probably even now he's out there convincing himself that all this is merely illusion, made to try his soul and test his ability to remain unchanged. Well, if that's the case, well, poor devil, there isn't much we can do, you know. But Phineas wasn't listening then. He clutched the words he'd heard savagely to his bosom and went stiffly out and back toward the office of G.R. Sloane across from the little room, number 408. Of course he should have known. All this was merely illusion made to try his soul, illusion and test no more. Let them try him. They would find him humble in his sufferings as always, not complaining, resisting firmly their temptations. Even though Sloane denied him the right to fast, still he would find some other way to do proper penance for his sins. Though Callahan broke his back, though 1,000 bees attacked him at once, still he would prevail. Forgive and guide me to sin no more, but preserve me in righteousness all the days of my life, he repeated, and turned into the building where there was more work and misery awaiting him. Sometimes he'd be rewarded. Sometime. Back in his head, a small shred of doubt sniggered gleefully. Oh. Love the idea that it's both heaven and hell. So what'd you guys think of that one? CW, I just finished up a story called Hereafter Incorporated by Lester Del Rey. The next story that I'm going to read, since you just signed out of work, nice. Um, the next story that I'm going to read is from Stephen King. We've had a lot of Stephen King lately, but that's okay. We love Stephen King, just like we love TikTok and the TikTok shop. The TikTok shop for all your pointless needs. Cheap stuff and stuff that will probably break within a week of you buying it. A nice place to visit. Yeah, I can see where you'd get that, where you might think that. Florida Thunder, thank you. I try to see. Oh, so at this point, I actually have a spreadsheet of all of the stories that I currently have in my ebook library. And the as of last night, because I picked up a few more anthologies, and um, it uh, I'm now sitting at about 1,300 short stories. Um, so I'm not going to run out of material for a long time. So yeah. Oh, the John story. Yeah, that was such a good one. That one, and then last Friday doing Cycle of the Werewolf was so much fun because that's a great story. That is such a great story. I'm glad I was able to fit that into a single night. And we are going to have at least one single story night this week. Just a reminder, I'll be live tomorrow between 12 and 2. I'm going to be hosting a lunchtime live, so it'll be fun. Florida Thunder, well, welcome. Glad to have you. And then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, I'll be on at my regular time, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll be doing 2 hours. Tomorrow night, I'll be hanging out with my best friend. We'll be This will be the fourth year in a row that we've hung out over the phone, over a video call, and yeah. Oh, Joan, the crazy dog lady. I'm glad you stumbled on us too. Where in the UK are you? My daughter lives in Liverpool. I'm actually hoping to go visit her later this year, if the airplane ticket prices don't get crazy. Well, thank you guys for all of the likes and the shares and the gifts. I really, truly appreciate it. Wakefield in Yorkshire. Okay. All right. Oh, Manchester. Okay. Okay. Yeah, my daughter's in Liverpool, in Roby. So I'm hoping to go there later this year. And I will actually be, if I do, I will be doing a live from Liverpool. So, Illusions Diary of a Reluctant Messiah. I have not heard of that one. Who's the author? All right. So, the next story, and this is our feature presentation, is The Mangler by Stephen King. Somebody requested that. If you are here in chat, listening or watching, let me know who you are because, like I said, somebody requested it, and always love to know who. Because somebody had requested The Jaunt, and that turned out to be a fantastic read. So, all right. Now I'm going to excuse my horrible eyesight. There we go. I love Stephen King. I absolutely love it. There are a lot of his short stories that I'm kind of planning to read, and a lot of them that I can't because he gets a little vulgar, and I don't want to get. Electro Sign. I think it might have been you. I do think It might have been you. Um, He really, I mean, he's one of my favorite. The guy is a genius. If I don't know how many of you have ever read the Dark Tower series, it's absolutely an astonishing achievement in storytelling. So yeah. All right. Well, let's move on to our next story. This one is The Mangler by Stephen King. Officer Hunton got to the laundry just as the ambulance was leaving, slowly with no siren or flashing lights. Ominous. Inside, the office was stuffed with milling, silent people, some of them weeping. The plant itself was empty. The big automatic washers at the far end had not even been shut down. It made Hunton very wary. The crowd should be at the scene of the accident, not in the office. It was the way things worked. The human animal had a built-in urge to view the remains. A very bad one, then. Hunton felt his stomach tighten, as it always did when the accident was very bad. 14 years of cleaning human litter from highways and streets and the sidewalks at the bases of very tall buildings had not been able to erase that little hitch in the belly, as if something evil had clotted there. A man in a white shirt saw Hunton and walked towards him reluctantly. He was a buffalo of a man, with head thrust forward between shoulders, nose and cheeks vein-broken either from high blood pressure or too many conversations with the brown bottle. He was trying to frame words. But after 2 tries, Hunton cut him off briskly. "Are you the owner, Mr. Gartley?" No, I'm Stanner, the foreman." "God, this is..." Hunton got out his notebook. "Please show me the scene of the accident, Mr. Stanner, and tell me what happened." Oh, excuse me. Whew. Stanner seemed to grow even more white. The blotches on his nose and cheeks stood out like birthmarks. Do I have to?" Hunton raised his eyebrows. "I'm afraid you do. The call I got said it was serious." "Serious?" Stanner seemed to be battling with his gorge. For a moment his Adam's apple went up and down like a monkey on a stick. "Mrs. Frawley is dead. Jesus, I wish Bill Garley was here." "What happened?" Stanner said, "You'd better come over here." He led Hunton past a row of hand presses, a shirt-folding unit, and then stopped by a laundry marking machine. He passed a shaky hand across his forehead. "You'll have to go over by yourself, officer. I can't look at it again. It makes me... I can't. I'm sorry." Hunton walked around the marking machine with a mild feeling of contempt for the man. They run a loose shop, cut corners, run live steam through home-welded pipes. They work with dangerous cleaning chemicals without proper protection, and finally someone gets hurt, or gets dead. Then they can't look. They can't... Hunton saw it. The machine was still running. No one had shut it off. The machine he later came to know intimately. The Hadley Watson Model 6 Speed Ironer and Folder. A long and clumsy name. The people who worked here in the steam and the wet had a better name for it. The Mangler. Hunton took a long, frozen look, and then he performed first in his 14 years as a law enforcement officer. He turned around, put a convulsive hand to his mouth, and threw up. "You didn't eat much," Jackson said. The women were inside doing dishes and talking babies while John Hunton and Mark Jackson sat in lawn chairs near the aromatic barbecue. Hunton smiled slightly, the understatement. He hadn't eaten nothing. "There was a bad one today," he said. "The worst." "Car crash?" "No, industrial." "Messy?" Hunton did not reply immediately, but his face made an involuntary writhing grimace. He got a beer out of the cooler between them, opened it, and emptied half of it. "I suppose you college profs don't know anything about industrial laundries." Jackson chuckled. "Well, this one does. I spent a summer working in one as an undergraduate." "Then you know the machine they call the speed ironer?" Jackson nodded. "Sure. They run damp flat work through them, mostly sheets and linen, a big, long machine." "That's it," Hunton said. "A man named Adele Frawley got caught in it at the Blue Ribbon Laundry cross town. Sucked her right in." Jackson looked suddenly ill. "But that can't happen, Johnny. There's a safety bar. If one of the women feeding the machine accidentally gets a hand under it, the bar snaps up and stops the machine. At least, that's how I remember it." Hunton nodded. "It's state law, but it happened." Hunton closed his eyes, and in the darkness he could see the Hadley-Watson speed ironer again, as it had been that afternoon. It formed a long, rectangular box in shape, 30 feet by 6. At the feeder and the moving canvas belt moved under the safety bar up at a slight angle and then down. The belt carried the damp, dried, wrinkled sheets in continuous cycle over and under 16 huge revolving cylinders that made up the main body of the machine. Over 8 and under 8 pressed between them like thin ham between layers of superheated bread. Steam heat in the cylinders could be adjusted up to 300 degrees for maximum drying. The pressure on the sheets that rode the moving canvas belt was set to 800 pounds per square foot to get out every wrinkle. And Mrs. Frawley, somehow, had been caught and dragged in. The steel asbestos-jacketed pressing cylinders had been as red as barn paint, and the rising steam from the machine had carried the sickening stench of hot blood. Bits of her white blouse and blue slacks, even ripped segments of her bra and panties, had been torn free and ejected from the machine's far end 30 feet down. The bigger sections of cloth folded with grotesque and blood-stained neatness by the automatic feeder. But not even that was the worst. "It tried to fold everything," he said to Jackson, tasting bile in his throat. "But a person isn't a sheet, Mark. What I saw, what was left of her?" Like Stanner, the hapless foreman, he could not finish. "They took her out in a basket," he said softly. Jackson whistled. "Who's going to get it in the neck? The laundry or the state inspectors?" "I don't know yet," Hunton said. The malign image still hung behind his eyes, the image of the mangler wheezing and thumping and hissing, blood dripping down the green sides of the long cabinet in runnels, the burning stink of her. "Depends on who okayed that goddamn safety bar and under what circumstances." "If it's management, can they wiggle out of it?" Hunton smiled without humor. "The woman died, Mark. If Gartley and Stanner were cutting corners on the speed ironer's maintenance, they'll go to jail, no matter who they know in the city council." "Do you think they were cutting corners?" Hunton thought of the blue ribbon laundry, badly lighted, floors wet and slippery, some of the machines incredibly ancient and creaking. "I think it's likely," he said quietly. They got up to go in the house together. "Tell me how it comes out, Johnny," Jackson said. "I'm interested." Hunton was wrong about the mangler. It was clean as a whistle. 6 state inspectors went over it before the inquest, piece by piece. The net result was absolutely nothing. The inquest verdict was death by misadventure. Hunton, dumbfounded, cornered Roger Martin, one of the inspectors, after the hearing. Martin was a tall drink of water with glasses as thick as the bottoms of shot glasses. He fidgeted with a ballpoint pen under Hunton's questions. "Nothing. Absolutely nothing doing with the machine." "Nothing," Martin said. "Of course, the safety bar was the guts of the matter. It's in perfect working order. You heard that Mrs. Gillian testify. Mrs. Frawley must have pushed her hand too far. No one saw that. They were watching their own work. She started screaming. Her hand was gone already, and the machine was taking her arm. They tried to pull her out instead of shutting it down. Pure panic. Another woman, Mrs. Keene, said she did try to shut it off, but it's a fair assumption that she hit the start button rather than the stop in confusion. By then it was too late." "Then the safety bar malfunctioned," Hunton said flatly. "Unless she put her hand over it rather than under." "You can't. There's a stainless steel fencing above the safety bar, and the bar itself didn't malfunction. It's circuited into the machine itself. If the safety bar goes on the blink, the machine shuts down." "Then how did it happen, for Christ's sake?" "We don't know. My colleagues and I are of the opinion that the only way the speed ironer could have killed Mrs. Frawley was for her to have fallen into it from above. And she had both feet on the floor when it happened. A dozen witnesses can testify to that." "You're describing an impossible accident," Hunton said. "No, only one we don't understand." He paused, hesitated, and then said, "I will tell you one thing, Hunton, since you seem to have taken this case to heart. If you mention it to anyone else, I'll deny I said it. But I didn't like that machine. It seemed almost to be mocking us. I've inspected over a dozen speed ironers in the last 5 years on a regular basis. Some of them are in such bad shape that I wouldn't have a dog unleashed around them. The state law was lamentably lax, but they were only machines for all that. But this one, it's a spook. I don't know why, but it is. I think if I found one thing, even a technicality, that was off whack, I would have been ordered to shut it down." "Crazy, huh?" "I felt the same way," Hunton said. "Let me tell you something that happened 2 years ago in Milton," the inspector said. He took off his glasses and began to polish them slowly on his vest. "Fella had parked an old icebox out in his backyard. The woman who called us said her dog had been caught in it and suffocated. We got the state policeman in the area to inform him that it had to go to the town dump. Nice enough fella, sorry about the dog. He loaded it into his pickup and took it to the dump the next morning. That afternoon, a woman in the neighborhood reported her son missing." "God," Hunton said. "The icebox was at the dump, and the kid was in it, dead. A smart kind, according to the mother. She said he'd no more play in an empty icebox than he would take a ride with a strange man. Well, he did. We wrote it off. Case closed." "I guess," Hunton said. "No. The dump taker went out the next day to take the door off the thing. City Ordinance number 58 on the maintenance of public dumping places." Martin looked at him expressionlessly. "He found 6 dead birds inside. Gulls, sparrows, a robin. And he said the door closed on his arm while he was brushing them out. Gave him a hell of a jump. The mangler at the Blue Ribbon strikes me like that, Hunton. I don't like it." They looked at each other wordlessly in the empty inquest chamber, some 60 blocks from where the Hadley Watson Model 6 speed ironer and folder sat in the busy laundry, steaming and fuming over its sheets. The case was driven out of his mind in the space of a week by the press of more prosaic police work. It was only brought back when he and his wife dropped over to Mark Jackson's house for an evening of whist and beer. Jackson greeted him with, "Have you ever wondered if that laundry machine you told me about is haunted, Johnny?" Hunton blinked, at a loss. "What?" "The speed ironer at the Blue Ribbon Laundry. I guess you didn't catch the squeal this time." "What squeal?" Hunton asked, interested. Jackson passed him the evening paper and pointed to an item at the bottom of page 2. The story said that a steam line had let go on the large speed ironer at the Blue Ribbon Laundry, burning 3 of the 6 women working at the feeder end. The accident had occurred at 3:45 p.m. and was attributed to a rise in steam pressure from the laundry's boiler. One of the women, Mrs. Annette Gillian, had been held at City Receiving Hospital with second-degree burns. "Funny coincidence," he said. But the memory of Inspector Martin's word in the empty inquest chamber suddenly reoccurred. "It's a spook." And the story about the dog and the boy and the birds caught in the discarded refrigerator. He played cards very badly that night. Mrs. Gillian was propped up in bed reading Screen Secrets when Hunton came into the 4-bed hospital room. A large bandage blanketed one arm and the side of her neck. The room's other occupant, a young woman with a pallid face, was sleeping. Mrs. Gillian blinked at the blue uniform and then smiled tentatively. "If it was for Mrs. Chernikoff, you'll have to come back later. They just gave her medication." "No, it's for you, Mrs. Gillian." Her smile faded a little. "I'm here unofficially, which means I'm curious about the accident at the laundry. John Hunton." He held out his hand. It was the right move. Mrs. Gillian's smile became brilliant, and she took his grip awkwardly with her unburnt hand. "Anything I can tell you, Mr. Hunton? God, I thought my Andy was in trouble at school again." "What happened?" "We was running sheets, and the ironer just blew up, or it seemed that way. I was thinking about going home and getting off my dogs when there's this great big bang like a bomb. Steam is everywhere, and this hissing noise, awful." Her smile trembled on the verge of extinction. "It was like the ironer was breathing, like a dragon it was. And that's Alberta Keene, shouted that something was exploding and everyone was running and screaming, and Ginny Jason started yelling she was burnt. I started to run away, and I fell down. I didn't know it got worse until then. God forbid it was no worse than it was. That live steam is 300 degrees. The paper said a steam line let go. What does that mean? The overhead pipe comes down into this kind of flexible line that feeds the machine. George, Mr. Stanner, said there must have been a surge from the boiler or something. The line split wide open." Hunton could think of nothing else to ask. He was making ready to leave when she said reflectively, "We never used to have these things on that machine. Only lately. The steam line breaking. That awful, awful accident with Mrs. Frawley. God rest her.
And little things, like the day Essie got her dress caught in one of the drive chains. That could have been dangerous if she hadn't ripped it right out. Bolts and things fall off. Herb Dement, he's the laundry repairman, has had an awful time with it. Sheets get caught in the folder. George says it's because they're using too much bleach in the washers, but it never used to happen. Now the girls hate to work on it. Essie even says there are still little bits of Adele Frawley caught in it, and it's sacrilege or something, like it had a curse. It's been that way ever since Sherry cut her hand on one of the clamps.
Sherry? Hunton asked.
Sherry Oulette. Pretty little thing, just out of high school. Good worker, but clumsy sometimes. You know how young girls are. She cut her hand on something.
Nothing strange about that? There are clamps to tighten down the feeder belts.
Nothing strange about that. There are clamps to tighten down the feeder belt, see? Sherry was adjusting them so we could do a heavier load and probably dreaming about some boy. She cut her finger and bled all over everything. Mrs. Jillian looked puzzled. It wasn't until after the bolts started falling off. Adele was, about a week later. As if the machine had tasted blood and found it liked it. Don't women get funny ideas sometimes, Officer Hunton?
Wow. Just watch my brain buffer in real time. Ironically, he had met Mark Jackson in a washateria in the block that had separated their houses. And it was there that the cop and the English professor still had their most interesting conversations. Now they sat side by side in bland plastic chairs, their clothes going round and round behind the glass portals of the coin-op washers. Jackson's paperback copy of Milton's collected works lay neglected beside him while he listened to Hunton tell Mrs. Jillian's story. When Hunton had finished, Jackson said, "I asked you once if you thought the Mangler might be haunted. I was only half joking. I'll ask you again now." "No," Hunton said uneasily. "Don't be stupid." Jackson watched the turning clothes reflectively. "Haunted is a bad word. Let's say possessed. There are almost as many spells for casting demons in as there are for casting them out. Fraser's Golden Bough is replete with them. Druidic and Aztec lore contain others, even older ones back to Egypt. Almost all of them can be reduced to startlingly common denominators. The most common, of course, is the blood of a virgin." He looked at Hunton. "Mrs. Jillian said the trouble started after this Sherry Oulette accidentally cut herself?" "Oh, come on," Hunton said. "You have to admit she sounds the type," Jackson said. "I'll run right over to her house," Hunton said with a small smile. "I can see it. Miss Oulette, I'm Officer John Hunton. I'm investigating an ironer with a bad case of demon possession. Would like to know if you're a virgin. Do you think I'd get the chance to say goodbye to Sandra and the kids before they carted me off to the booby hatch?" "I'd be willing to bet you'll end up saying something just like that," Jackson said without smiling. "I'm serious, Johnny. That machine scares the hell out of me, and I've never seen it." "For the sake of conversation, what are some of the other so-called common denominators?" Jackson shrugged. "Hard to say without study. Most Anglo-Saxon hex formulas specify graveyard dirt or the eye of a toad. European spells often mention the hand of glory, which can be interpreted as the actual hand of a dead man or one of the hallucinogenics used in connection with the witch's sabbath, usually belladonna or psilocybin derivative. There could be others." "And you think all these things got into the Blue Ribbon Ironer?" "Christ, Mark, I'll bet there isn't any belladonna within a 500-mile radius. Or do you think someone whacked off their Uncle Fred's hand and dropped it in the folder? Well, if 700 monkeys typed for 700 years, one of them would turn out the works of Shakespeare. Hunton finished sourly. Go to hell. Your turn to go across to the drugstore and get some dimes for the dryers. It was very funny how George Stanner lost his arm in the mangler. 7 o'clock Monday morning, the laundry was deserted except for Stanner and Herb Dement, the maintenance man. They were performing the twice-yearly function of greasing the mangler's bearings before the laundry's regular day began at 7:30. Dement was at the far end, greasing the 4 secondaries and thinking of how unpleasant this machine made him feel lately, when the mangler suddenly roared to life. He had been holding up 4 of the canvas exit belts to get at the motor beneath, and suddenly the belts were running in his hands, ripping the flesh off his palms, dragging him along. He pulled free with a convulsive jerk seconds before the belts would have carried his hands into the folder. "What the Christ, George?" he yelled. "Shut the friggin' thing off!" George Stanner began to scream. It was a high, wailing, blood-maddened sound that filled the laundry, echoing off the steel faces of the washers, grinning mouths of the steam presses, the vacant eyes of the industrial dryers. Stanner drew in a great, whooping gasp of air and screamed again, "Oh, God of Christ, I'm caught! I'm caught!" The rollers began to produce rising steam. The folder gnashed and thumped. Bearings and motors seemed to cry out with a hidden life of their own. Dement raced to the other end of the machine. The first roller was already going a sinister red. Dement made a moaning, gobbling noise in his throat. The mangler howled and thumped and hissed. A deaf observer might have thought at first that Stanner was merely bent over the machine at an odd angle. Then even a deaf man would have seen the pallid, eye-bulging rictus of his face, mouth twisted open in a continuous scream. The arm was disappearing under the safety bar and beneath the first roller. The fabric of his shirt had torn away at the shoulder seam on his upper arm, and his upper arm bulged grotesquely as the blood was pushed steadily backwards. "Turn it off!" Stanner screamed. There was a snap as his elbow broke. Dement thumbed off the Dement thumbed the off button. Holy cow, I can't even talk. The mangler continued to hum and growl and turn. Unbelieving, he slammed the button again and again. Nothing. The skin of Stanner's arm had grown shiny and taut. Soon it would split with the pressure the roll was putting on it. And still he was conscious and screaming. Dement had a nightmare cartoon image of a man flattened by a steamroller, leaving only a shadow. "Fuses!" Stanner screeched. His head was being pulled down as he was dragged forward. Dement whirled and ran into the boiler room, Stanner's screams chasing him like lunatic ghosts. The mixed stench of blood and steam rose in the air. On the left wall were 3 heavy gray boxes containing all the fuses for the laundry's electricity. Dement yanked them open and began to pull the long cylindrical fuses like a crazy man, throwing them back over his shoulders. The overhead lights went out. Then the air compressor, then the boiler itself, with a huge dying whine. And still the mangler turned. Stanner's screams had been reduced to bubbly moans. Dement's eye happened on the fire axe in its glassed-in box. He grabbed it with a small, gagging whimper and ran back. Stanner's arm was gone, almost to the shoulder. Within seconds, his bent and straining neck would be snapped against the safety bar. "I can't," Dement blubbered, holding the axe. "Jesus, George, I can't. The machine was an abattoir now.
The folder spat out pieces of shirt sleeve, scrapes of flesh, a finger. Stanner gave a huge whooping scream, and Dement swung the axe up and brought it down in the laundry's shadowy lightlessness. Twice, again. Stanner fell away, unconscious and blue, blood jetting from the stump just below the shoulder. The mangler sucked what was left into itself and shut down. Weeping, Dement pulled his belt out of its loops and began to make a tourniquet. Hunton was talking on the phone with Roger Martin, the inspector. Jackson watched him while he patiently rolled a ball back and forth for 3-year-old Patty Hunton to chase. He pulled all the fuses? Hunton was asking. And the off button just didn't function, huh? Has the ironer been shut down? Good. Great. Huh. No, not official. Hunton frowned, then looked sideways at Jackson. Are you still reminded of that refrigerator, Roger? Me? Yes. Goodbye. He hung up and looked at Jackson. Let's go see the girl, Mark. She had her own apartment. The hesitant yet proprietary way she showed them in after Hunton had flashed his buzzer made him suspect that she hadn't had it long, and she sat uncomfortably across from them in the carefully decorated, postage-stamp living room. I'm Officer Hunton, and this is my associate, Mr. Jackson. It's about the accident at the laundry. He felt hugely uncomfortable with this dark, shyly pretty girl. Awful, Sherry Oulette murmured. It's the only place I've ever worked. Mr. Gartley is my uncle. I liked it because it let me have this place and my own friends, but now it's so spooky. The State Board of Safety has shut the ironer down pending a full investigation, Hunton said. Did you know that? Sure, she sighed restlessly. I don't know what I'm going to do. Miss Oulette, Jackson interrupted. You had an accident with the ironer, didn't you? Cut your hand on a clamp, I believe. Yes, I cut my finger. Suddenly her face clouded. That was the first thing. She looked at them woefully. Sometimes I feel like the girls don't like me so much anymore, as if I were to blame. I have to ask you a hard question, Jackson said slowly. A question you won't like. It seems absurdly personal and off the subject, but I can tell you it is not. Your answers won't ever be marked down in a file record. She looked frightened. Did I do something? Jackson smiled and shook his head. She melted. Thank God for Mark, Hunton thought. I'll add this, though. The answer may help you keep your nice little flat here, get your job back, and make things at the laundry the way they were before. I'll answer anything to have that, she said. Sherry, are you a virgin? She looked utterly flabbergasted, utterly shocked, as if a priest had given communion on and then slapped her. Then she lifted her head, made a gesture at her neat deficiency apartment, as if asking them how they could believe it might be a place of assignation. I'm saving myself for my husband, she said simply. Hunton and Jackson looked calmly at each other, and in that tick of a second, Hunton knew that it was all true. A devil had taken over the inanimate steel and cogs and gears of the mangler and had turned it into something with its own life. Thank you, Jackson said quietly. What now? Hunton asked bleakly as they rode back. Find a priest to exorcise it? Jackson snorted. You'd go a far piece to find one that wouldn't hand you a few tracts to read while he phoned the booby hatch. It has to be our play, Johnny.
Can we do it? Maybe. The problem is this. We know something is in the mangler. We don't know what. Hunton felt cold, as if touched by a fleshless finger. There are a great many demons. Is the one we're dealing with in the circle of Bubastis or Pan, Baal, or the Christian deity we call Satan? We don't know. If the demon had been deliberately cast, we would have had a better chance. But this seems to be a case of random possession. Jackson ran his fingers through his hair. Blood of a virgin, yes. But that narrows it down hardly at all. We will have to be sure. Very sure. Why? Hunton asked bluntly. Why not just get a bunch of exorcism formulas together and try them out? Jackson's face went cold. This isn't cops and robbers, Johnny. For Christ's sake, don't think it is. The rite of exorcism is horribly dangerous. It's like controlled nuclear fission in a way. We could make a mistake and destroy ourselves. The demon is caught in that piece of machinery, but give it a chance, it could get out. It would love to get out, Jackson said grimly, and it likes to kill. When Jackson came over the following evening, Hunton had sent his wife and daughter to a movie. They had the living room to themselves, and for this Hunton was relieved. He could still barely believe that he had become involved in. I canceled my classes, Jackson said, and spent the day with some of the most god-awful books you can imagine. This afternoon I fed over 30 recipes calling demons into the tech computer. I've got a number of common elements, surprisingly few. He showed Hunton the list. Blood of a virgin, graveyard dirt, hand of glory, bat's blood, night moss, horse's hoof, eye of toad. There were others, all marked secondary. Horse's hoof, Hunton said thoughtfully. Funny. Very common, in fact. Could these things, any of them, be interpreted loosely? Hunton interrupted. If lichens picked at night could be substituted for night moss, for instance. Yes, that's very likely, Jackson said. Magical formulas are often ambiguous and elastic. The black arts have always allowed plenty of room for creativity. Substitute jello for horse's hoof, Hunton said. Very popular in bag lunches. I noticed a little container of it sitting under the ironer's sheet platform on the day the Frawley woman died. Gelatin is made from horses' hooves. Jackson nodded. Anything else? Bat's blood, well, it's a big place, lots of unlighted nooks and crannies. Bats seem likely, although I doubt if the management would admit to it. One could conceivably have been trapped in the mangler. Jackson tipped his head back and knuckled bloodshot eyes. It fits. It all fits. It does? Yes, we can safely rule out the hand of glory, I think. Certainly no one dropped a hand into the ironer before Mrs. Frawley's death, and belladonna is not indigenous to the area. Graveyard dirt? What do you think? It would have to be a hell of a coincidence, Hunton said. Nearest cemetery is Pleasant Hill, and that's 5 miles from the Blue Ribbon. Okay, Jackson said. I got the computer operator, who thought I was getting ready for Halloween, to run a positive breakdown of all the primary and secondary elements on the list. Every possible combination. I threw out some dozen which were completely meaningless. The others fall into fairly clear-cut categories. The elements we've isolated are in one of those. What is it? Jackson grinned. An easy one. The mythos centers in South America with branches in the Caribbean related to voodoo. The literature I've got looks on
looks on the deities as strictly bush league compared to some of the real heavies like Sadath or who cannot be named. The thing in that machine is going to slink away like the neighborhood bully.
How do we do it?
Holy water and a smidgen of the Holy Eucharist ought to do it. And we can read some of Leviticus to it, strictly Christian white magic.
You're sure it's not worse?
Don't see how it can be, Jackson said pensively. I don't mind telling you I was worried about the Hand of Glory. That's very black juju. Strong magic.
Holy water wouldn't stop it?
A demon called up in conjunction with the Hand of Glory could eat a stack of Bibles for breakfast. We would be in bad trouble messing with something like that at all. Better pull the goddamn thing apart.
Well, are you completely sure?
No, but fairly sure. It all fits too well.
When?
The sooner the better, Jackson said. How do we get in? Break a window?
Hunton smiled, reached into his pocket, and dangled a key in front of Jackson's nose.
Where'd you get that? Gartley?
No, Hunton said. From a state inspector named Martin.
He knows what we're doing?
I think he suspects. He told me a funny story a couple of weeks ago.
About the mangler?
No, Hunton said. About a refrigerator. Come on. Adele Frawley was dead, sewed together by a patient undertaker. She lay in her coffin. Yet something of her spirit perhaps remained in the machine, and if it did, it cried out. She would have been known, could have warned them. She had been prone to indigestion, and for this common ailment she had taken a common stomach tablet called EZ Gel, purchasable over the counter of any drugstore for 79 cents. The side panel holds a printed warning. People with glaucoma must not take EZ Gel because the active ingredient causes an aggravation of that condition. Unfortunately, Adele Frawley did not have that condition. She might have remembered the day, shortly before Sherry Oulette cut her hand, that she had dropped a full box of EZ Gel tablets into the mangler by accident. But she was dead, unaware that the active ingredient which soothed her heartburn was a chemical derivative of belladonna, known quaintly in some European countries as the Hand of Glory. There was a sudden ghastly burping noise in the spectral silence of the blue ribbon laundry. A bat fluttered madly for its hole in the insulation above the dryers where it had roosted, wrapping wings around its blind face. It was a noise almost like a chuckle. The mangler began to run with a sudden lurching grind, belts hurrying through the darkness, cogs meeting and meshing and grinding, heavy pulverizing rollers rotating on and on. It was ready for them. When Hunton pulled into the parking lot, it was shortly after midnight, and the moon was hidden behind a raft of moving clouds. He jammed on the brakes and switched off the lights in the same motion. Jackson's forehead almost slammed into the padded dash. He switched off the ignition, and the steady thump, hiss, thump became louder. "It's the mangler," he said slowly. "It's the mangler, running by itself in the middle of the night." They sat for a moment in silence, feeling the fear crawl up their legs. They got out and walked to the building, the sound of the mangler growing louder. As Hunton put the key into the lock of the service door, he thought that the machine did sound alive, as if it were breathing in hot gasps and speaking to itself in hissing, sardonic whispers. All of a sudden, I'm glad to be with a cop," Jackson said. He shifted the brown bag he held from one arm to the other. Inside was a small jelly jar filled with holy water wrapped in wax paper and a Gideon Bible. They stepped inside, and Hunton snapped up the light switches by the door. The fluorescence flickered into cold life. At the same instant, the mangler shut off. A membrane of steam hung over its rollers. It waited for them in its new, ominous silence. God, it's an ugly thing, Jackson whispered. Come on, Hunton said, before we lose our nerve. They walked over to it. The safety bar was in its down position over the belt which fed the machine. Hunton put out a hand. Close enough, Mark. Give me the stuff and tell me what to do. But no argument. Jackson handed him the bag, and Hunton put it on the sheet table in front of the machine. He gave Jackson the Bible. I'm going to read, Jackson said. When I point at you, sprinkle the holy water on the machine with your fingers. You say, In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Ghost, get thee from this place, thou unclean. Got it? Yes. The second time I point, break the wafer and repeat the incantation again. How will we know if it's working? You'll know. This thing is apt to break every window in the place getting out. If it doesn't work the first time, we keep doing it until it does. I'm scared green, Hunton said. As a matter of fact, so am I. What if we're wrong about the Hand of Glory? We're not, Jackson said. Here we go. He began. His voice filled the empty laundry with spectral echoes. Turnest not thou aside to idols, nor make molten gods for yourself. I am the Lord thy God, and the land will vomit you out for having defiled it, as it vomited out nations before you. Jackson looked up, his face strained and pointed. The words fell like stones into a silence that had suddenly become filled with a creeping, tomb-like cold. The mangler remained still and silent under the fluorescence, and to Hunton it still seemed to grin. Hunton sprinkled holy water across the feeder belt. There was a sudden gnashing scream of tortured metal. Smoke rose from the canvas belts where the holy water had touched and took on writhing, red-tinged shapes. The mangler suddenly jerked into life. We got it! Jackson cried above the rising clamor. It's on the run! He began to read again, his voice rising over the sound of the machinery. He pointed to Hunton again, and Hunton sprinkled some of the host. As he did so, he was suddenly swept with a bone-freezing terror, a sudden vivid feeling that it has gone wrong, that the machine had called their bluff and was the stronger. Jackson's voice was still rising, approaching climax. Sparks began to jump across the arc between the main motor and the secondary. The smell of ozone filled the air like the copper smell of hot blood. Now the main motor was smoking. The mangler was running at an insane, blurred speed. A finger touched the central belt would have caused the whole body to be hauled in and turned into a bloody rag in the space of 5 seconds. The concrete beneath their feet trembled and thrummed. A main bearing blew with a searing flash of purple light, filling the chill air with the smell of thunderstorms. And still the mangler ran, faster and faster, belts and rollers and cogs moving at a speed that made them seem to blend and merge, change, melt, transmute. Hunton, who had been standing almost hypnotized, suddenly took a step backwards. "Get away!" he screamed over the blaring racket. "We've almost got it!" Jackson yelled back. "Why?" There was a sudden,
indescribable ripping noise, and a fissure in the concrete floor suddenly raced toward them and passed, widening. Chips of ancient cement flew up in a starburst. Jackson looked at the mangler and screamed. It was trying to pull itself out of the concrete like a dinosaur trying to escape the tar pit. And it wasn't precisely an ironer anymore. It was still changing, melting. The 550-volt cable fell, spitting blue fire into the rollers, and was chewed away for a moment. Two fireballs glared at them like lambent eyes filled with a great and cold hunger. Another fault line tore open. The mangler leaned towards them, within an ace of being free of the concrete moorings that held it. It leered at them. The safety bar had slammed up, and what Hunton saw was a gaping, hungry mouth filled with steam. They turned to run, and another fissure opened at their feet. Behind them, a great screaming roar as the thing came free. Hunton leaped over, but Jackson stumbled and fell sprawling. Hunton turned to help, and a huge amorphous shadow fell over him, blocking the fluorescence. It stood over Jackson, who lay on his back, staring up in a silent rictus of terror, the perfect sacrifice. Hunton had only a confused impression of something black and moving that bulked to a tremendous height above them, something with glaring electric eyes the size of footballs, an open mouth with a moving canvas tongue. He ran. Jackson's dying scream followed him. When Roger Martin finally got out of bed to answer the doorbell, he was still only a third awake. But when Hunton reeled in, shock slapped him fully into the world with a rough hand. Hunton's eyes bulged madly from his head, and his hands were claws as he stretched at the front of Martin's robe. There was a small, oozing cut on his cheek, and his face was splashed with dirty gray specks of powdered cement. His hair had gone dead white. "Help me! For Jesus' sake, help me! Mark is dead! Jackson is dead!" "Slow down," Martin said. "Come in the living room." Hunton followed him, making a thick, whining noise in his throat like a dog. Martin poured him a 2-ounce knock of Jim Beam, and Hunton held the glass in both hands, downing the raw liquor in a choked gulp. The glass fell unheeded to the carpet, and his hands, like wandering ghosts, sought Martin's lapels again. "The mangler killed Mark Jackson. Oh, God, it might get out. We can't let it out. We can't. Oh!" He began to scream, a crazy, whooping sound that rose and fell in jagged cycles. Martin tried to hand him another drink, but Hunton knocked it aside. "We have to burn it," he said. "Burn it before it can get out." "Oh, what if it gets out? Oh, Jesus, what if—" His eyes suddenly flickered, glazed, rolled up to show the whites, and he fell to the carpet in a stone-like faint. Mrs. Martin was in the doorway, clutching her robe to her throat. "Who is he, Rog? Is he crazy? I thought—" She shuddered. "I don't think he's crazy." She was suddenly frightened by the sick shadow of fear on her husband's face. "God, I hope we came quick enough." He turned to the telephone, picked up the receiver, and froze. There was a faint, swelling noise from the east of the house, the way that Hunton had come. A steady, grinding clatter growing louder. The living-room window stood half open, and now Martin caught a dark smell on the breeze, an odor of ozone or blood. He stood with his hand on the useless telephone as it grew louder, louder, gnashing and fuming. Something in the streets was hot and steaming. The blood stench filled the room. His hand dropped from the telephone. It was already out. Well,
it's a good one. It's definitely a good one. Right? Only Stephen King could write a story about a possessed laundry machine. I mean, seriously. How does one even think of that? But I guess he did. Yeah, that was a good one. That was a good one. So, well, I'm glad you guys liked the stories tonight. Exorcism of an Appliance. James Patterson. I can look it up. So I definitely have more planned for this week. Tomorrow, just a reminder, yeah, sometimes I think my washing machine is possessed. My favorite is when I wash my clothes and I put my jeans are like they get stuck on the one side and it starts, and the machine starts rocking back and forth and it's bam, 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 and I'm like, what is going on down there? I go down to the basement and I see the washing machine is like moved like a foot. Just like what? And then I realized that I messed up putting my jeans in. I didn't straighten them out, and yeah. Oh man. Well, thank you guys so much for the gifts and the shares and the likes. It's awesome. So tomorrow I will be live, be doing a special lunchtime live from 12 to 2 p.m. Eastern Standard. I expect that one's going to be a light live. I'll have probably one or two stories picked out for that, and but I'm doing that because I have some things going on in the afternoon, and then I'm going to be spending time with my daughter, and then it will be tomorrow night I'll be hanging out with my best friend. Her and I are hanging out on a video call. She lives on the other side of the country. But who knows? Maybe I'll jump on after I get off the phone with her. Who knows? Depends on how I feel, how tired I am. And then Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday will be my regular time, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard. So that is 8 o'clock Central, 7 o'clock Mountain, and 6 o'clock Pacific. Oh, don't worry, crazy mama, I won't. This week I'm keeping it light. I'm not doing a lot of visuals this week because it's going to be a lot to prepare for, but I'm going to try to pick good stories, and because I know you guys appreciate the stuff that I pick, which I love, and I will I just want to come in and have fun. It's my birthday tomorrow, and this week I love doing these lives and spending a couple of hours at night with you guys. Trista, I don't have any books, but I think what I'm going to do eventually is have a list of links to Amazon for the books that I read. So like tonight it would be like
Stephen King's Skeleton Crew. Um, and then just, have a running list of books that I read. Also, the books that I have on Audible, and that kind of thing. So you guys can check out my audiobooks that I've done. I'm actually on audiobooks 7 and 8 I'm working on. So I will definitely check out James Patterson. And then next weekend on Sunday, I haven't decided yet, but I will probably be doing Winnie the Pooh. I don't know, but I probably will be doing Winnie the Pooh. Either that or I might do A Bear Called Paddington, because I love that book. And you guys will hear me do a really bad English accent. But yeah. So I'm super happy that you guys are so enthusiastic about this week. I like having all of you as a part of a community that we're building, because we are building it together, you guys and myself. Because I wouldn't be here without you, and you wouldn't be here without me. So it's mutual. The feeling is definitely mutual. Oh, Trista, no. I'm just a guy that reads stories. That's all. And I enjoy the hell out of it. And I enjoy interacting with all of you. I love bringing these stories to people. No, Crazy Mama, you are. You are one of my every live regulars, which I think is wonderful, and I appreciate you so much. Date and time. So normally my lives are Sunday, Wednesday, and Friday. You're welcome, Casey. And they're always at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard. This week is a little different. Trisha, I can certainly do that. Thanks. I'm humble like Wilbur. I'm not sure that I'm radiant and some pig, but I'm humble. This week is a little different because it is my birthday week, and I just figured I'd go live every day this week and just have a little fun. So, and just to give you guys an idea, you guys have gotten me up to 13.6 thousand followers. Trista, there is one of my other regulars, Eddie Santiago. Eddie, are you still in the live, bud? Has a similar story. 13.7. And that's why he comes in, because because of vision issues, he can't read. So he comes in and listens to the stories. And that means the world to me, that I can do that for you. And I love being a part of everybody's routine. I mean, so many of you schedule time to be here. And I think it's amazing. Well, Trista, I am super, super glad that I can be here for you. And I'm super glad to have you. I am really. I'm super glad to have all of you. Queen of Denial, no, I did not bathe in buttermilk. Well, Johnny, I am glad that you found us and are here to listen to the stories. And this, one of the cool things is I think a lot of you have never heard
Oh, thank you, sir. Appreciate the support from Florida. Um, like you, a lot of you have probably never heard of Lester Del Rey, who is, in pulp magazine circles from 1940, 1930, around there. He is, he is a very well known author. And but I'm sure a lot of you have never heard of him. So one of the things I love is the fact that I can bring these stories to you and you've never heard them before, and introduce you to new authors that you have never heard of. And I love it. I love it. How do I choose my books? A couple of different ways. As I said earlier, I have a catalog of like 1,300 short stories, and I have them organized by authors, and um, and I have like the authors, I have the stories, and I have how many words are in the story, and then I can calculate how long it'll take me to read it, and then oh, that's wonderful, Casey. And then I see what file it's in because I have a database of uh, ebooks, and um, so I'll go through and I'll look at, I'll decide if I want to have a theme. Like one night we did stories that Twilight Zone episodes were based on, or we did an evening with Stephen King where we did two Stephen King books. Um, and then we do, like, I have like, I'll have, like, if I pick two different authors. um, yeah, TikTok is weird with their notifications. I, Johnny, lately I've been reading a lot of Stephen King, but my name on Audible. So for those of you that don't know, my name is Jeremy Thompson. Um, so you can search me on Audible. I have 6 books up there now, and like I said, I'm going to be putting a list with links on my website, um, which I'm still in the process of building. But so I go through and I look for, like, say, different stories and what the themes are, and I'll possibly have like a ghost story night, and I'll do all ghost stories, but they might be different authors. And then I can see, based on the time that I have set up, I can look at what how long it'll take me to read them, so I can fit them into the 2 hours that I go on, that I go live. Um, the It's Jeremy. I'm also on YouTube. Yep. Um, and so based on that, I can plan, how many stories I'm going to read. There's been nights where I read one story because it takes up the whole 2 hours. I try to shoot for like 110 minutes, or between 100 and 110 minutes. And yes, I did do a Lovecraft night. And I'm actually, so anyway, let me finish my thought. um, I am a bit of a scatterbrain. Um, I try to shoot for 100 and 110 minutes so I can have time to, um, so I can have time to do this whole interaction, which I absolutely love. Um, but yes, so Angeline, the I'm actually, so I there's on Google Play Books and on Kindle and whatnot, there's a company that does what they call the mega packs, and they're like 99 cents, but each one of them have anywhere from 15 to 30 stories in them, and they're all by authors from, like, all the way from pulp the pulp era in the 1920s all the way through the 1940s and 50s, and also up to modern, but they're all themed. Well, I have two that I found that were, um, actually, if you go, well, actually, you know what I'll do? Here, I'll do this. Hold, please. No, I can say what it is. I'm pretty much, if you search for Undead Papa on the tubes, or even Instagram or whatever, you'll find me. I'm the only Undead Papa there. But on Audible, Trista, I will type my name into chat. And that's the name you can find me there under. So I found these packs that there's two of them that I found that are all centered around the Cthulhu mythos, which is H.P. Lovecraft. So I have these stories. I can do like a Cthulhu mythos night, or I can do a cosmic horror night. Or, and they have science fiction ones too. So we can do, a space opera night, or alien invasion night, stuff like that. So and that's the thing. I try to not just pick the stories at random. I try to curate them. And it ends up being fun that way. Johnny, it's very possible. It is very possible. Linda, so when I'm reading, it's hard for me to keep up with chat, but that's why I have three moderators. One of them is Wings, here under Wings at Work, and I also have Songbird 007 and Tessa Vale Audio. And they do a fantastic job of answering any questions and things that pop up, and I couldn't do this without them. Also, I have my regulars in here, like Crazy Mama 26 or Yane Marie, or Katie, or all of these people. What's really cool is the community tends to help each other out answering questions. Where are we in the story? What are we reading tonight? What times does he go live? And what I love, the thing that I love, is that I'm here reading. That's my primary function. That's what you guys come here for. And I see the chat going. And what's beautiful is that most of the time you guys are talking to each other and not necessarily to me. And I love the fact that I have put so many of you in the same room. And, everybody greets people as they come in. They make everybody gets to feel welcome. And that's, besides telling stories, I want this to be like we're all sitting around a campfire. You may hear me say in some of my videos are, well, I'm glad you found me. Some of my videos, you'll hear me say Storytime with Undead Papa. Come and join us by the fire. That's what I really feel like this is. Like we're all sitting around a campfire and I'm telling you guys a story, which I love. It is one of the best things I do. This really is my favorite. Doing these lives, the 3 nights a week that I normally do them, it's my favorite part of the week. And I've said this before, but when I'm feeling like crap and I've had a bad day, or I'm dealing with depression or anxiety or anything like that, I'm like, I don't want to go on, but then I do, and I feel so much better. I feel refreshed. Trista, it's going to be noon. It'll be noon Eastern Standard. Noon to 2. Tomorrow's going to be a special lunchtime live because I'll be busy tomorrow night. But and then the rest of the week it's 9 p.m. Eastern Standard, both Wednesdays straight through until Saturday. So I'll be doing extra. Normally I'm only on Sunday for Sunday night bedtime stories, and then I'm on okay, so you're an hour behind. So for you tomorrow will be 11 a.m. So you're an hour behind me. And then Storytime with Undead Papa, it'll be Wednesdays and Thursdays, and those are stories like what we read tonight. And then Sundays is strictly bedtime stories. It's family-friendly chapter books. And the vibe on Sunday nights is like, if you like being here now, the vibe on Sunday nights is that, just more. It is 11:10 for me right now. And the cool part is, Amy, I'm so glad you found me too. I'm very happy to have you as part of the community. And that's the beautiful thing. I have this wonderful, wonderful community of people, and it's great. Stephanie, I'm so glad. I'm so glad you were able to be there. It is. I don't know if I have it up on my YouTube channel. I don't normally, um, because it's copyrighted. I don't normally keep that stuff up there. But I've kind of been not taking stuff down, so it might be up there. It might be up there as well. But I would have to go look. Um, but yeah, so it's the vibe on Sunday is just, it's this but more, and we're reading a comforting book usually. Um, yeah, you know what? You're not the only one. Crazy Mama in here is you usually Crazy Mama's usually playing Minecraft. But yeah, so it's, I don't know. I just love the vibe. I mean, I was just telling Trista how when you first started coming in here, you were, I believe it was it you that would come in and you were playing Minecraft. I can't remember if it was. I thought it was you. I could be wrong though. Cleaning or doing dishes, yeah. And you know what, Angeline, that is totally fine. I, like, yeah, something else. Yeah, I thought it was you. Um, like not this past Sunday, but the Sunday before, we had 500 people in here at one point, and that's just freaking crazy. But I love it. You know, it's like, it's almost like, like I'm in a theater full of people and reading to you guys live, and it's so much fun. But so like I said, I'll be back on tomorrow at noon Eastern till 2, and then the rest of the week will be the rest of the will be at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard. Well, Trista, I'm happy to have you. Well, good, Johnny. You know what? I'm glad you're here. In all seriousness, I'm glad that all of you are here, and I appreciate every single one of you, because you guys make it worthwhile. So, I am gonna sign off for the night, because my voice is starting to go. Thank you all for spending a little time with me this evening. If you like these stories and want to support what I do, there is a subscription option, which you can check out on my channel page, or you can. There is also here in the live. It's called a super fan. You can do those too. But subscribe or not, I'm just glad you're here. So until tomorrow, please be kind to each other. And be kind to yourself, because kindness matters. And so do you. Good night, everybody.